From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Reporting tonight from Columbus.
To be elected state judges. The court ruled that the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which prevents states from creating voting districts that discriminate against minorities, includes elections for judges. Up to now, it had only been applied to elections for other offices, such as legislators and mayors. And a survey 6 years ago found that out of 12,000 state judges, only 500 were black. The court has given the police new powers. The justices rule that police may board a bus or a train to conduct random searches for drugs even when there is no evidence to suspect that a crime has been committed. Here's our law correspondent, Tim O'Brien.
This is the practice challenged in the Supreme Court. Police looking for drugs board a bus, start talking to passengers, and then ask.
I'd like to ask your permission to search that bag.
That's what happened to Terrance Bostick sitting in the back of a bus at this terminal in Fort Lauderdale.
He consented. We searched the bag, and that's when we found the kilo of cocaine.
But Bostick later argued he had agreed to the search only because he was intimidated by the sudden encounter with police, and that his Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable search and seizure had been violated. The Florida Supreme Court declared this practice unconstitutional, calling the intrusion upon privacy rights too great for a democracy to sustain. The court even compared the practice to the Gestapo tactics of Nazi Germany. Today, the U.S. Supreme Court disagreed, ruling when a passenger voluntarily consents to talk and allows luggage to be searched, the Fourth Amendment does not apply. Justice Sandra O'Conner for the majority said the test is whether a reasonable passenger would feel free to decline the officer's requests or otherwise terminate the encounter. The dissenters, led by Justice Thurgood Marshall, said when a passenger is cornered by police in the back of a bus, he's never truly free to say no. Marshall accused the court's majority of suspending constitutional guarantees so that the government may more effectively wage a war on drugs. An astonishing number of drug traffickers do agree to be searched. In only 10 months of working the buses, Detective Rubino seized 260 pounds of cocaine and made more than 100 arrests. The court said not only may Rubino and all police ask permission to search, they have no obligation to tell passengers. They have every right to say no. Tim O'Brien, ABC News, Fort Lauderdale.
In Colombia, one of the world's most powerful and violent drug traffickers has spent his first full day in jail, and a very comfortable jail. It might be good for Colombia, but many U.S. officials are not pleased. Here's ABC's Mark Potter.
After months of negotiations, Pablo Escobar was flown by government helicopter to a comfortable jail in his hometown, where some American authorities worry he could still run his business. Current and former U.S. law enforcement officials fear the Colombian government has given in to the traffickers.
It is discouraging because I really believed over the last 7-8 years that traffickers were really on the run, and I don't believe it was necessary to make a deal like this for him.
Colombia's National Assembly has now banned extradition, meaning Escobar no longer faces trial in the U.S., where he could receive a life sentence. The Colombian government has also promised reduced sentences, perhaps only a few years, to Escobar and other traffickers who surrender. Police say traffickers who do turn themselves in could easily be replaced by others who continue to ship cocaine.
The strategy for the government should have been just straight ahead, extradite them, incarcerate them, and no deals.
But Colombian authorities say the surrender plan will reduce the drug war violence that has killed thousands of Colombians. Most of that violence has been blamed on the Medellin cartel, headed by Pablo Escobar. Mark Potter, ABC News.
Another case of drugs and the law. In Harrisburg, Pennsylvania next Monday, a doctor will go on trial, charged with prescribing anabolic steroids to several professional wrestlers, including the biggest name in the ring, Hulk Hogan. Here's ABC's Armin Kateya.
Professional wrestling claims to have cleaned up its act in recent years and now bills itself as family entertainment. A large part of its appeal centers on the popularity of Hulk Hogan and his do-good anti-drug image. But a federal grand jury has been told that Hogan and 4 other wrestlers obtained anabolic steroids from this Harrisburg, Pennsylvania doctor from 1988 until this year. Dr. George Zahorian has been indicted by a federal grand jury on 15 counts of distributing muscle-building steroids and other controlled substances. The 5 wrestlers have not been charged because personal use of anabolic steroids was not a federal crime before January of this year. Hogan, who has declined comment, is especially popular with children appearing on everything from cartoons to lunchboxes to action figures. The doctor's attorney says his client was only providing what the wrestlers wanted.
These guys didn't get that way on pasta and fruits. These guys are what they are based on their performance and appearance, and steroids help them get there.
While it may not surprise some people that pro wrestlers have used steroids, testimony in this trial may well damage their image and appeal. Armin Katayan, ABC News, New York.
We'll have more news in just a moment. President Bush, but Mr. Bush made it clear the course of U.S.-Soviet relations, at least for now, still has more to do with Mikhail Gorbachev. Here's ABC's Brit Hume.
Here was the president who has gone to such lengths to cultivate Mikhail Gorbachev, receiving the Gorbachev rival Mr. Bush could no longer ignore. Boris Yeltsin has something Gorbachev has yet to even try for, the popular mandate of a democratic election. The president couldn't say enough about that.
And I want to publicly congratulate President Yeltsin on a truly historic victory in this election last week. And to put it in American terms, he won by a landslide.
But the president said even more about relations with you-know-who.
But at the same time, I want to be very clear about this. The United States will continue to maintain the closest possible official relationship with the Soviet government of President Gorbachev.
Yeltsin said he, too, is working closely with Gorbachev, though he did state a position favoring freedom for the Baltic states, which the U.S. agrees with, but Gorbachev does not.
Because one cannot build a union with chains.
The trouble was, Yeltsin's mic was so loud it drowned out most of his interpreter's simultaneous translation, including when Yeltsin seemed to say his country had voted to cut off all foreign aid, including military assistance to Cuba. That perked up Mr. Bush's ears.
So now we're going to go in and do some work in here, and I learned something with great interest here about the laws as already passed in the Soviet Union, and I salute them.
The White House later acknowledged that Yeltsin was talking about a measure passed by the Parliament of the Russian Republic, which has no effect on Moscow's foreign aid program. It was a further example why the administration, despite its desire to get along with Yeltsin, feels it must continue to do business with Gorbachev. Brit Hume, ABC News, the White House.
Secretary of State Baker and Soviet Foreign Minister Besmertnik have tried again to work out a nuclear arms control treaty. There are still some differences, though, and until they're worked out, Secretary Baker says there will not be a Soviet-American summit. The two foreign secretaries met in Berlin today, on the very day that the German parliament in Bonn voted to move itself and most government offices back to Berlin now that Germany has been reunited. We'll be back with more news in a moment.